Boker Tov. Today's daf is Daf Tzadik Tes in Vav Mecias. We learn for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael and Sun Batzar B'Shivya. We're at the on Tzadik Tes and Beis where we left off yesterday. The fourth line on Tzadik Tes and Beis. Amar Shmuel. Haiman de Gozel Chavitza. The Tamri Mechaver. A man stole a fig cake, a cake made of figs that were pressed together. The Isbei Chamishim Tamri. The fig cake has 50 dates. Agavadari that are pressed together. No, I'm sorry, 50 dates in this cake. Agavadari, when they're sold as a unit together, when they're sold as a unit, when they're sold as a unit, they're sold for 49 prutos, let's say, for 49 cents. Chada chada, but if they're sold individually, it's sold for 50. In other words, wholesale, you can buy it for 49, and retail, they sell it for 50 because you sold one at a time. Okay, so when this person sold it, what does he have to prepay? Does he repay 49 or 50? So, Misham Chamishim Nechichada. Since he stole it as one big fig cake, not fig, date cake rather, a cake of dates. I said figs, it's dates, right? Tell me your dates. When he sold them if you sell them as one unit wholesale, it's sold for 49. So when he repays, he also has to pay 49. The Gazlan only paid 49. Misham Chamishim Nechichada. Lahegdish, if he stole it from Hegdish, it belonged to Hegdish. Misham Chamishim, he pays the full amount. Hegdish gets more, he pays the full amount, plus the 25% fine that the Torah assesses for stealing from Hegdish. Mashegid Mazik, this is only when you steal from Hegdish and you want to eat it. But if you damage Hegdish, then you don't pay the extra 50. You don't pay the extra 25%. Damamar, that's a side thing, really. Damamar ish ki yochel kodesh. If a man eats something from a kodesh and he's moral and that, so he has to pay kodesh. He has to, as a fine, besides me'ilah, the carbon, he has to repay it, and they add 25%. Prat lemazik, excluding a mazik. If you eat, meaning if you're having enough from it, as opposed to damaging. Okay, so we make this difference. If you stole from Hedyo, you only paid the wholesale rate, 49, because if it's sold as a unit, wholesale, a whole box or a whole cake of these dates sold for 49. Since it's sold individually, retail for one apiece, then if you stole it from Hegdish, Hegdish gets the benefit of the retail price of 50, not 49. Why do you pay a Hedyo Chamishim Nechichada? Why do you pay the Hedyo only 49? Again, Chamishim Nechichada means 50 less one. Namely, let the retailer say, I would have sold them one at a time. Why, when you stole it from me, do we only get 49? If it's sold as a unit, I would have sold them individually. I would have gotten 50. We learned back in Baba Kama that when you damage a field, and here also when you damage, you don't pay for each individual, let's say, tomato or bed of cucumbers, whatever it was that you damage, whatever they would go for in the street, but rather you assess the entire field or the entire garden or patch and say, okay, how much is that worth before? How much is it worth now? That means that it's an advantage really for the Gosling or for the damager because he doesn't pay the full amount that each tomato or bed of cucumbers would go for, but you look at the whole field and say, how much is it worth less now? So here too, when it comes to non-Hegdish, when it comes to Chulin, you pay for the minimum value. In other words, you pay the minimum loss, you don't pay the maximum. True, the person who owned the cake of dates could have said, listen, I could have sold them for 50, not 49. Still, we don't say that. We look at it and we say, okay, look, the damage was really 49. We take the lesser value when it comes to assessing value of chulin from somebody, not the higher value. Again, like you say, if I stole 10 tomatoes from your field, I don't take what's the price of 10 tomatoes. I look at what the whole field was worth before and what it's worth now. But according to this, we're making a difference between chulin and hegdish. The name of the Savar Shmuel din hegdish lav din gevah. Does that mean to say that the din of hegdish is not like the din of hegdish? Dummy, it's not the same. By the time we learn not to live in a korah, let's say you're a gizbar. You're a gizbar of hegdish, and you took a stone or a beam that belonged to hegdish, may hegdish. Lo mo. If he just took it, he's not mo. Why? Because he's the gizbar. He's entitled to hold on to the stuff. It's like the gizbar, the treasurer of the shul, might have the money of the shul in his pocket. Not that it's his, but it's hektish money. He's entitled to hold on to it. But if he gave it to somebody else, then then the person who took it out from the rishus of hektish into the other ones, that means the gizbar. If he gave it to somebody else, then the gizbar is moel. Let's say the gizbar took this beam and he built a house around it. He built his house. He built it into his house. Lo moel. There's not mila there. Why? Because he really hasn't changed it in any way. It's still just the beam. Until he lives underneath there for a shavapruta value. Meaning he didn't have a house. He built a house. Now let's say it costs $10 to stay in a house overnight. So now if he used this beam to build the house is built on the beam. So as soon as he was in the house, let's say for an hour, and he had hana of a fraction of the $10 that it costs per day, then he's moel, because he had a na. When he had a na from hektish, then it was moel. Meaning, we just explained that the gizbar is not moel. Doesn't commit sacrilege unless he gives it to somebody else, transfers the property to somebody else, or if he has a na from it, right? If he changed it, if he took the beam and cut it up into pieces to make wooding, wood siding or whatever, then of course he was moel at that point. But if he didn't change the nature of the beam, he just stuck it in the house and had the house rest on that beam, then he's on moel when he had a no. Okay, that's what we talk about hektish. Ravu was sitting for Rabbi Yochanan, and he said in Shmei Shmuel, Ravu said, he said to Rabbi Yochanan that Shmuel said, Zosameris, you see from here, that if you live in somebody else's house without his knowledge, and the other person doesn't even rent out his house normally, you just stayed in his house without his knowledge, it's what we call zenehana b'zeh lo chaser. He didn't lose anything. He doesn't rent it out anyway. You stayed in his house. You caused no damage. You made your bed, and you didn't cause any damage. You didn't even know. You left no trace. You didn't even know. You still have to pay, because you see over here by hektish that even though the beam was not altered in any way, but as soon as he had a na, he has to pay. He's moel. So he says Shmuel. So according to Bavu, Shmuel extrapolated from that halacha the same thing for chulin, that if he had a na from somebody's property, even though there was no loss to the other person, to the owner, you have to pay. So what do you see? That there's no difference between chulin and hektish when it comes to repaying for hana that you had from them. So the Gemara's answered it, but when Rav Bo said that in the name of Shmuel in front of Rabbi Yochanan answered him, Shmuel. That's not a kasha. Shmuel retracted from what he said. He said that chulin and hektish is the same halacha. That's not the case. By hektish, he's moel as soon as you have anah. By chulin, if you had anah from somebody and it caused no damage, you don't have to pay for that. And that's why we're saying there is a difference between chulin and hektish, and we applied that in the case of the cake of dates as well. And when it comes to hektish, you have to pay the maximum value. When it comes to chulin, we are more makel for the person who stole it. Says the Gemara, "Mimai dahid harbe." How do you know when he said Shmuel was harbe? How do you know that he was back? That he retracted from this last halacha, saying that chulin is like hektish? Maybe he retracted from what he said originally. Shmuel started off today's daf, or what we learned in today's daf, by saying that if you stole the cake of dates from chulin, you pay the wholesale value. If you from hektish, you pay the retail value plus, of course, the 25%. So maybe he retracted from that. Says says lo. We know we retracted from this last halacha of comparing chulin to hektish. Hektish shalomidas, where you don't know about, where hektish, where you didn't, the hektish, the gizbar of hektish didn't know, or hektish didn't know about it. It's like hektish when he knew about it. Meaning, Rashi explains hektish shalomidas is always midas, because it's midas Hashem. But it's hektish shalomidas. Who is hektish? There's no person who's hektish. It all belongs to God. So God knows what's going on, and that's like hektish midas, meaning when you took something from a person, from a chulin person, and he knew about it, like you slept in his house and he knew about it, so that he could charge you. But if you didn't know about it, there was no loss, then you can't be charged. So there is a difference. So like Rava says, hektish shalomidas is like hektish midas. It's not like hektish shalomidas. We don't say hektish shalomidas is like hektish shalomidas, that you have to pay either way. No. You only have to pay if he knows about it. If you didn't cause him any loss, you don't have to pay. So there's a difference between hektish and hektish, even though the cases are not exactly the same. Here we're saying that hektish shalomidas, you don't have to pay. according to the way Shmuel retracted. Hegdish you do because God always knows. There's no such thing as Hegdish lo midas, because God always knows what's going on. Pardon?
This encourages squatters.
Encourages?
Squatters.
Yeah, that could encourage squatters, correct. It could also encourage chesed. If there's no loss to you, what complaint do you have? There's absolutely no loss. In very few cases could you say there's absolutely no loss. Like there is a loss, you dirtied the place up, you left a mess or you did something, But yeah, electricity, right. So it's hard to say Hazana, but there are cases of Zanahan of Zelo. I come in one day and somebody used my tefillin. I could tell they weren't bundled the same way. Okay, Zanahan of Zelo Chaser. It bothered me for a second, but okay, I was Makai. Somebody else used my tefillin, so they were Yotze the mitzvah. It's really Zanahan of Zelo Chaser. There's no real loss there, so it gives you an advantage. Okay, Amarava. Hanish Guloi, these porters, they broke these porters were schlepping a barrel of wine for the store, for the shopkeeper. Now, what is the barrel worth? The Yom Shuka on the market day, it sold for $5. Let's say for $5. The storekeeper could sell the barrel for $5. But Shar Yomi at other days, it's only sold for $4 because he can't get. It's not on market day. It's not as demand isn't as high. So what do they have to return? If they paid him back on the day of the market, all he goes back to the barrel because he can get his $5 for it. But Shar Yomi, when he can't get $5 for it, they have to give him $5 because he can't get $5 anymore. In other words, they stole his barrel, and if he would have had the barrel on market, they could have sold it for $5. So if they give it to him back on at the beginning of the market day, and he could sell it for $5, just give him back a barrel. If they give it back to him on a non-market day, and it's assuming that he can't keep it for the market day, like whatever it is, there's no market there. So then you have to give him back, it's only worth $4. So therefore, what do they have to do? They have to give him $5, because had they given it back to him before, he could have sold it for $5. That's only if he didn't have any other wine to sell on the market day. He didn't have anywhere to sell. He says, "Hey, you're giving it back to me yesterday. I could have sold it for $5. You owe me $5." But if he had other wine to sell on market day and he didn't sell it, he shows you, he should have sold that. He should have sold it, and he didn't. So it shows you that he wouldn't have sold it anyway on market day, and then you only have to pay back $4. But even if they pay him back $5 because they gave it back to him on a market day, and he on a non-market day, and had he had it on the market day, he could have sold it for $5. They still can deduct from the $5 agar tirche, the wage or the price of the fee of his tircha, meaning he still had to have workers, or how much would he have accepted not to have to sell it, to stay home. There's a price for his toil, so that would remove the damei barzanaisa, and also the damei barnasa, and also the fee of barzanaisa is either the marketing fee, somebody would like to call out to advertise it, because you're giving him back $5. You stole a barrel of $5. Out of the market, they could have sold it for $5. But when he would have sold for $5, he would have had a advertising fee, somebody to go out and drum up, give out those little sheets, come into the store and buy this stuff, that. Or the May Barzanais could also be called, some Farshim say, Rashi says it could also be the tapping fee. In other words, when they had a barrel, these were earthenware barrels, you had to have a tapper who put a barrel, like a barrel, to put a bung hole in there to draw that. So since over here he didn't have to go through that because you stole the whole barrel and you're giving him back cash, so he saved the seller. He would have gotten $5, but he would have had the expenses of marketing. He would have had the expenses of labor, maybe a worker to help him with it, or his fee, what it was worth it for him to stay home and not work that day, or the tapping or the bearer's fee. All right, now we come to the Mishnah on tomorrow's Daf Kuf and Manalef. The Mishnah, famous Mishnah, is brought down in Baba Kama, in Baba Basra. We have it all over. Machlok Parah b'Chamor. You exchanged a cow is a female, Parah is a female cow, who was pregnant, for a chamor, right, for a donkey. Now, if I sell you a cow, what's the normal way you acquire it after paying for it? Pull it. So if you pull it, if it was still pregnant or not, right? You could tell if the baby was born or not. Over here, though, it was done with a chalipin. Now, the way chalipin works is like the rabbi does. The rabbi the rabbi gives you his pen or his handkerchief on Erev Pesach or before Pesach, and in return, all your chametz is you're giving him the schus to sell all your chametz, right? So he doesn't have the chametz in front of him, right? As soon as when you do a chalipin, as soon if two people exchange something, as soon as you give me what I'm acquiring from you, my stuff is acquired to you wherever it is. It doesn't have to be here in front of us. Therefore, what happened over here was they exchanged a para for a chamor. Okay, let's say Reuben had a para and Shimon had a chamor, and they exchanged. If the Yolda and the baby, the para had given birth, or you sold your Shepha Knani. Now Shepha Knani is an Eved and sold for cash. That's to make a kinyan there. So maybe I gave you cash for your Shifcha, but she's not here at the time. Doesn't have to be here at the time because it's done with cash. Now the question is, when was the child born? In both the case of the Shifcha where she had a baby, and the question is, who owns the baby? Who owns the slave, the baby slave? Or who owns the baby, the calf that came from the para? Of course, the seller says, Reuben, who had the para, says, oh, gave birth before I sold it to you. So the baby's mine. You get the mother, not the baby. And the purchaser says, no, the one who purchased, Shimon, who purchased the para, says, no. It was born after we made the exchange, meaning Shimon, who had the chamor, Reuben had the para. So let's say Reuben acquired the chamor with Chalip, and he made a mashiach on the chamor, right? And in exchange, he said, okay, I'm going to pull the chamor to me, and in exchange, the para will go to you. Okay, fine. So Shimon claimed that the baby was born after he acquired the para. Reuben says it was born before. What do you do in a case like that? There's no way to know. There's no way to know. There was no witnesses, right? We don't know when the baby was born. What do you do in a case like that? So the Gemara says yachloket, Mishnah says yachloket. We'll see if that's the halacha. It's not the halacha, but he says you split it. Now, of course, that's like a Solomonic solution, because it doesn't really solve the solution. It doesn't solve the problem. Pardon? Of course, you split the monetary value. You're not going to split the baby. Oh, you could shecht it and split that too. But the point is, the baby was either born in my rishus or your rishus, right? We don't really solve the problem. The problem is we don't know who was. So the Mishnah says, yachlok, we'll see. Let's say the man had two slaves, an adult and a child, or two fields, and he sold one of them to the purchaser. The purchaser says, I bought the big one, or I bought the adult slave. The guy says, I don't know. What would you say in a case like that? The purchaser says, I bought the large one or the adult, and the seller says, I don't know. Okay, gets the bigger one. So the Pashut Pshat you would say is Bari V'Shem, Bari Yadav. I know what I bought. You don't know. Well, you're not sure. So I get the bigger one. But we saw yesterday, or the day before, we don't paskin the Bari V'Shem, Bari Yadav, right? We had a machlokas between Rav Huna and Rav Yudah on the one hand, who say Bari V'Shem, Bari Yadav. Rav Nachman, Rav Yochanan, we paskin like them say, we don't say Bari V'Shem, Bari Yadav. So what's going on over here? Why do you say Zacha B'Gadol? Okay, we'll see. The Gemara is going to talk about these cases. So, Hamocher, okay. Let's say the seller says, I know for sure I sold you the smaller one, or the baby slave. And the other one says, I don't know which one. He's only going to get the cotton, because he doesn't even have a demand on the other. He just says, I sold you, you're only going to get the one. Here, for sure, the seller says, I know I sold you the smaller one. The other guy says, I don't know. So he gets the smaller one. Okay, we'll see in the Gemara also. Let's say they are sure, or maybe they should. They say the purchaser says, I bought the large one or the adult, and the large field or the adult, and the seller says no, it's definitely the smaller one. The seller swears that he sold him the small one. Now the Gemara is going to say, what kind of a shvu is this? What kind of a shvu is this? He demands the lokach, says, I bought the big one. I bought field number A, the big one. And the other guy says, no, I sold you field number B. So the mocher swears that he only sold him the small one. What kind of a shvu is that? Is that a shvu the rice or Rabbanan? We'll see. The Gemara is going to discuss all this. Okay, if they each say, I don't know, I have no idea. We don't know which one it was. It wasn't clear. Neither one says, again, yachloku. Again, you say yachloku, this goes like Simchas, who says you split it, but that's not necessarily the halacha. Says the Gemara, Amay yachloku, why do you say in the first case, amachlef para v'chamor, the classic case, I took your donkey, and in exchange, you get my para. Now we're arguing about when was the baby born? Before the exchange or after the exchange? So you say, why don't you see where the para is? Where is the para? In your rishus or my rishus? Right? If Avram was here, he would have said, what about Mosim Chavero Varaya, right? So let the other guy be Mosim Chavero. Amar Avchia Barav and Amar Shmuel, Omeres Ma'agam. It's not in anybody's rishus. It's in a swamp. Right? It's in a swamp. The Gemara doesn't say a public rishus harabim, because in rishus harabim, it's not likely that they would do a deal like that with it. It was in a semi-private area, like in a swamp. Shivchanami, the kind of besimta, she's in a small, narrow street or road or whatever, off the rishus harabim. So that's where it's not in either rishus. Okay, so the para is not in either rishus, but v'nukma acheskes the marakama. Okay, but we have a chazaka called the presumption of who owned it before. If Reuben owned the para before, we assume it was born in his rishus. And therefore Shimon, who acquired the para, he did acquire the para, right? He did acquire the para by Reuben taking his Shimon's donkey. By Reuben taking Shimon's donkey. When I say right? So Shimon acquired the para. But what about the baby? Well, if he wants the baby, we assume it was born in Reuben's rishus. So Shimon should be Moshe Mechavaraya. He goes like Sumchus Amar Mammon Motzah Cholken. We don't pass like Sumchus, but Sumchus, who was a Talmud of Rav Meir, said Mammon Motzah Basafik Cholken below Shvur. You split without a Shvur. That's his halacha. We don't pass like. Says Gemara. In other words, we would talk to say Moshe Mechavaraya. Who's the Motz Mechabero? Okay, if it's not in Rishus Harabim, if it's like in Rishus Harabim or semi-private areas, so there's nobody who's a chazaka in it now, but you have the chazaka the Mikara. There's a chazaka who owns it now. It's in my Rishus now. It's not a chazaka, it's mine. It's in my Rishus, so you want to take it away from me. No, not that kind of a chazaka. It's what we call a chazaka the Mikara. Who owned it before? Well, we assume it's Reuben's. And Achanami, according to halacha, Shimon would have to prove that it was born after the exchange took place. But this goes like Simchus, who says Mammon B'Savik Cholken below Shavuot. So more saying, but Simchus B'Shem B'Shema. When does Simchus say Yachloku? Like the last case in the Mishnah, where either one said I don't know. Then you split it. Each one says I don't know. Maybe it's mine. Maybe I got the big one. Maybe the small one. I don't know. But Bar Miomer. In the first case in the Mishnah, apparently it's speaking about they're both sure. Machal Par B'Chamar B'Yalda. V'Chen Machal Shavas B'Yalda. Ze'omer. One says, I know it was born before, I sold it to you before the exchange. One says afterwards. It seems they're both sure about it. So Rabbi Avuna says, you're right. Simcha says in either case. When it's Mammon of Savik Cholken, whether they're both sure, whether they're both not sure. You're right. Simcha only said Shem Shema. He didn't really say it when they're both sure. The Tani Zeh Omer Shema. And it's changed the Mishnah to read Zeh Omer Shema Achlo Macharti. They're not sure. So Reuben says maybe it was born before I sold it to you, but Zemer Shema Meshalkachti says no, maybe it was born afterwards. We don't know. In other words, they both. What happened? The guy took the donkey, and when they went to fetch the para, there was a baby there. Nobody knows. So the seller says maybe it was born before I sold it to you, and the buyer says no, maybe it was born afterwards. So in the case of Shema Shema, it goes like Sumchus. Tanan. A Mishnah goes on to say at the end of the Mishnah, we're jumping now from the first case of the Mishnah, where each one says it's mine, right? Now we're saying according to Rava says, well, maybe it's mine. Okay, you want to say the last case of the Mishnah clearly says Shema. That's Shema. I don't know. That's what the Mishnah says at the end. According to Rava, who says that the Seifa is so maybe the first case is also Shema v'Shema. El Rabba Rav Huna the Amar Ein Amar Some Bari says even Bari Ashta Bari Mechloku. If the first case where each one is sure, you say Echloku Shem boy. Why did you have to take the last case? If in the first case of the Mishnah where they're both sure that it's theirs, you say you split it. So certainly where they don't know, neither one does. Certainly you say Echloku. What do you need to say before? That's not a proof. You can't prove from over there that the Mishnah is speaking about that the first case must be Shema v'Shema also, because otherwise, if it's Bari, what do you need the last case for? If by Bari you split it, certainly by Shema v'Shema, that's no proof. Can't prove from there. Why? Maybe the Sefer tells you Shema. Tell me that the first case is Shema. Shalom. Tell me you shouldn't say Reisha Shema v'Shema. The Reisha is only Shema Shema. Alpha Bari below. You wouldn't say split it. Tana Sefer. So the Sefer also is even a Shema v'Shema. Even when it's clear that a Shema Shema. Shema Mechlal the Reisha Bari is Machlam Mishal the Reisha is Bari. So in other words, when Rabbi Rav Huna says that Simcha says halacha by Bari, If the first case is bari bari, what do you need the last case for of shema shema? The answer is to tell you that the first case is bari bari. The Mishnah didn't say bari bari. Each one says, I say maybe it was born before I sold it to you, and you say maybe it was born afterwards, right? But we don't know if it's maybe or sure. So the last case of the Mishnah says clearly it's shema shema. Each case says, I don't know. So, and even that case is echloku. So therefore the first case must be bari bari. Again, a ton of sefer we learn the reisha. We tell the sefer shema shema to reveal that the first case is bari bari. Shalotam, you shouldn't say maybe the reisha is only shema shema. Of a bari bari, you wouldn't split it. So therefore the sefer says clearly shema shema to teach me that the reisha must be speaking of bari bari. Why are the two separate cases? And that people still you split it. So Rabbi Rafuna says that Simcha says halacha moment of cholkin, even if it's bari bari. Whereas Rava says no, he only says it by Shem V'Shema. Tanan. Look at another case in the Mishnah. Zemer Gadol, Zemer Katan, right? The case says where he had two slaves, right? Two slaves or two pieces of land, right? And the question was, which one did he sell, the bigger one or the small one? Obviously, the mocher says, I sold you the smaller one. The seller says, no, I bought the bigger one, or the adult in the case of slaves. Yishba ha-mocher shekatan mocher. The mocher has to swear that he sold him the smaller ones. Now, Bishlam of the Rava, according to Rava, so Rava says what? That Simchas only says when each one's not sure. Then you split it. When each one is Shem is not sure. That's why he has to swear, because over here they are bari, right? Each one says, the mocher says, I know I sold you the small one. The lokech says, I know I bought the big one. That's why he has to swear. But according to Rabbi Puna, the Amar Ein Amar Simchas Chafil Bari Bari, whether they're sure or whether they're not sure, you split it. Amayish ba mocha. Why would the mocha swear? Now this kasha, you could ask. There's going to be more kashas on this case, but he's asking a kasha now specifically on Rabbi Puna. Rabbi Puna says because only says halacha, right? I'm sorry. Yeah, that Simchas Zacha even by Bari Bari. In other words, when two people are arguing, whether they're not sure, he's I don't know, or they're both sure. Simcha says you split it. So why does he swear over here? Why do you say that the mocher swears? The mocher says, I know I sold you the smaller one, either the small evet, the child evet, or the smaller field. Why do you swear? Why do you swear? Just split it. Amayish mocher. If the mission is going according to Simcha, you say moment of cholk and just split it, right? I feel baroy. Amayish mocher. Why do you say the mocher says? Why does he say the mocher swears that he sold him the smaller one and he gives him the smaller one and that's it? That settles it. Yachlokami boyle. You should say split it. And just moda b'sumkas heichadik shvur daraisa. Sumkas is moda when there's a shvur daraisa. Krabin lema come on. We're going to explain mostly in Amit base, but even a little bit over here. The next case we're speaking about over here. In this case, this you could understand all the other cases in the Mishnah pretty simply if you understand Mammon Cholkan. The first case they're arguing when the baby was born, or we're not sure when the baby was born, or even if you say Bari B'Shem Bari, if one's sure and one's not sure, okay, you can go with the idea of Bari B'Shem Bari Ada. But the fourth case really in the Mishnah, where the mocher says, I know for sure I sold you the small one, or the child slave, and the seller and the lokech says, no, I know I bought the big one. So you say over there, the mocher has to swear that he sold him the small one, right? That's what he said. The mocher swears, Zeh Omer Katan, Zeh Omer Gadol, Zeh Omer Katan, that both seems to be sure. Yish B'ha Mocher Shakatan Mocher. He has to swear that he sold my one. Now, the Kashlik Gemara is asking over here is according to Rabbi Barafun, who says that by Bari Simchas didn't say it's according to Rabbi who says that, not according to Rabbi. Rabbi says that Simchas didn't say his halacha by Bari, only by Shema v'Shema. Okay, only by Shema v'Shema. So he didn't say it by Bari. So and Rabbi learns that both the first case and the last case are speaking by Shema v'Shema. So according to Rabbi, it's not a problem. When they're both sure, you don't say split it. But according to Rabbi Arhuna, that Simcha said it's halacha that you split it, whether they're sure or whether they're not sure. So over here, why do you say the mocher swears? Just split it. The answer is there's a different case over here. It's not simple. It's not as simple as we read it. Over here, there's a shvur d'oraisa. What's a shvur d'oraisa? Modim b'mikzas. Like the Gemara is going to explain later on. That answers the Kashan Rabbi Arhuna. But the Gemara is still going to ask, well, what about the case itself? What are you talking about? Let's see the Gemara. This really will lead into tomorrow's Gemara, but we'll just start it off. A man had two slaves. Okay, so we said you had two big, or a field bigger and smaller one. They're arguing, right? When one is sure, one's not sure, you go by that. But over here, our case, this is really talking about, it's v'chule. It's going on our case where The mocher says, I know I sold you the small one. And the lokech says, I know I bought the big one. So you say the seller has to swear. It says more, my yishba. Why should he swear? He's the man. What happened? Lokech is demanding the big field. Let's say it's the field, right? Or right, big field. Lokech says, I bought the big field, field B. And the mocher says, no, I sold you field A. So why would he have to swear? There's no shvur. What's the shvur? When do you swear? If I say you owe me $100 and you're moted to 50, that's motive mixus. You have to swear in the other 50. But if I say I sold you field A and you're demanding field B, that's not motive mixus, right? It's talking about two different things. What you're claiming, I'm not motive. I'm not motive that I sold you B at all. I'm not motive that I sold you half of field B. I'm saying, Masha, what I'm motive to you, you didn't ask for. And over here, it's case of halach. Motive mixus, according to some, if you say halach, meaning you owe me, motive mixus normally is you owe me $100, and you say you only owe me 50, and here's the 50. Here's the 50 I owe. That's halach. So some say that halach is really not even a case of motive mixus. Why? Because halach means here's the 50, and we're only arguing about the other 50. And the other 50, I deny the whole thing. So it's really here halach too. Here's the field, or here's the shifra. You don't swear on a bottom. So what do you mean over here? It's the case of an eved. We don't swear on bottom, or on karka for that matter, right? We're talking about karka. So what's going? Why is there a shvu over here, b'chlal? Amra, we asked this before. According to Sumchas, according to Rabbi Rapun, who says that they argue even by bari. So why didn't the Sumchas just split it? That was one kasha. So he said no. The answer is it's a shvu deraisa. But now the Gemara is asking kind of a shvu over here. It's a masha. It's not motive and mixus. And even if it is motive mixus, it's halach. And also you don't swear on a bottom. Amra betono demei eved. Betono demei. He's not really asking for the eved or for the field. He's talking about the money. Give me the $100 that I paid you for the field. Betono demei eved gadol, demei eved cotton, demei sadik dola, demei sadik time. We're talking about the money. Oh, now we're not talking about apples and oranges or barley and wheat. Where if I ask you for wheat and you will say you claim that you owe me only barley, that's not motive and mixus. I say you owe me 100 bushels of wheat and you're motive to 50 bushels of barley. That's not a case of motive and mixus. And the same thing with the field, same with the evet. But over here we're talking about the money. Shmuel says betono ksus evet gadol, ksus evet kana. We're not talking about the evet. We're talking about his clothing. The clothing of an adult clothing versus children's clothing, or omrei sadigola, or the bundles of the field. In other words, not the field itself, but the bundles of a big field. I bought 1,000 bundles, and you say you only owe me I only bought 500 bundles. Omrei sadikan of a small field. That's what we're talking about. So what do you mean? Again, we're talking about two different things. If you're talking about the field, an adult shirt versus a child shirt are two different things. If I say you owe me an adult shirt and you're motive to a child shirt, it's not motive and mixus. It's not made of time. So it's going to explain, but the yalfi, meaning it was big one big piece of cloth that was all bundled or tied together like a roll of cloth. Meaning where I say you owe me, let's say, 10 yards of clothing, and you're only motive to 5 yards of clothing that would fit a child. So can I be a bit of lifey? Okay, so we're talking about there. So the Gemara tomorrow here is going to get into exactly how it. So what are all there are problems with this case. So we're taking that it's a motive mixus, but the real answer, the basic idea is why do you say that if I say I sold you a small field, and you say you owe me that I sold you the big field? Why do I have to make a shvur? Where's the motive mixus? The answer: we're not talking about the field. We're not talking about the evet. We're talking about the value, the money. I say I sold you a $50 field, and right, $100 field, and you say you only bought. You say you only. I'm sorry. I say I sold you the small field, right? The small field of $50 that's worth $50, and you say you bought the big field worth $100. So if the field isn't here or whatever it is, you could say you want your $100 back. And I say, no, I only owe you $50. So we're talking about money. We're talking about money, or we're talking about the bundles of grain out in the field, or we're talking about the clothing of an eved versus the clothing of a child. So we're talking about items over here, and therefore, it's not a case of mashatanu lo hodu lo mashadu lo tanu. It is a case of motive and mixus. It's a case of money. It's a case of give me 100 sheaves. You owe me 100 sheaves. No, I only owe you 50. You owe me 10 yards of clothing. No, I only owe you 50 yards of cloth. You owe me $100? No, I only owe you $50 worth. So we're talking about here Israeli Shmota Mitzvahs. The Gemara is going to ask about other kashas over here that why is it only a case of, how can you say you're talking about clothing? We're talking about an Eved. The answer is the Eved with the clothing. The Gemara is going to ask a bunch of questions on this, but the basic idea is that why does the Mocher have to swear? Because it's Moda Mimiksas. It's a case of Moda Mimiksas. Because he's Moda that he owes him part, and since he has to swear, what's Allah Moda Mimiksas? You have to swear, right? That you only owe him this much, you don't owe him any more. The Mocher swears that he only owes him, let's say, $50, that he only bought a small field, only $50. Right? He bought the field, and somebody took the field or whatever. So the Lokech says, you owe me $100. The Mocher says, I only owe you $50. So he's moted to the 50, and the other 50 he denies. On that, he has to make a shvua. And that's what we mean over here. It's a shvua d'oraisa. All right, we'll discuss this more tomorrow. Mitzvah Shem, as we pick up tomorrow's daf. And tomorrow we'll be only on Zoom. Well, because I can't do it's impossible here without the air conditioning. So tomorrow we'll be on Zoom at 5:20. I'll send out the link again. And then we'll come to shul afterwards for davening. Tomorrow's Rosh Chodesh, don't forget.